Well, hey, it's really good to be here today. I'm Jayne.Reynolds, board certified holistic nutritionist with Abundant Life Nutrition and Wellness Center. And this is my cohort in crime, Kelly.Calkins. She is a certified holistic nutritionist. And we both survived COVID. And so we wanted to come to you today and explain to you about our experiences with the virus and how we survived, right, Kelly?
Easily. So I'm loving that we're doing this so that people can understand how to feel more in control and realize that it's a very manageable virus. So when I had COVID, I actually did not think that I had COVID. Wouldn't have guessed it for the world. It felt like I had maybe some allergy things going on, but it had been windy. So I thought, okay, my sinuses are acting up. I didn't really have any energy changes. I did get a sore throat, but it was a weird sore throat because it didn't hurt here. It hurt in the back of my throat and then went up the back of my skull, and it turned into a headache. I got a phone call from some friends saying that they tested positive, and when I got that call, I thought for the first time, there's no way that this could actually be COVID because this is so mellow. And then my kids ended up being about 2 days later than me. So my son was 2 days later, and then my daughter was 2 days later, which really lines up with that exposure window that we see, right? Mm-hmm. Within 3 days, you're going to see symptoms. But if my friends had not tested positive, it would have never been on my radar that I even had COVID because it really just felt like I was a little under the weather.
And I had a slightly different experience. I feel like I went through a little bit rougher time with it. I certainly wasn't really sick by any stretch of the imagination. But again, I came home one night. I thought I'd been at the grocery store, and I often have quite a little bit of sore throat irritation after I've worn my mask for a long time. So we'd done the grocery shopping all night, and I was like, oh, that must be what that is, just a dry throat. And I woke up the next morning and it was still there, and it was still there on Sunday, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess this isn't going anywhere. And I immediately started like gargling with warm salt water. And on Sunday, I got a low-grade fever that it never topped 100.3, I don't think. And it was only there for a few hours. So I think it came on at about lunchtime, and by 5 in the evening, it was completely gone. And just gone. The sore throat persisted for a few days. My nose turned on like Niagara Falls and the ice melt. I mean, it was just like pouring. Yeah. And I definitely got to the point where I kind of lost my voice. So I woke up one day and I had body aches all over. It was very, very uncomfortable. It's the only day I broke down and took over-the-counter medication. I took a couple of Tylenol that morning, knocked it out, and I felt fine. And the next day I lost my sense of taste and smell, and then my mom was getting really, well, she wasn't really nagging. She was more like assertively suggesting.
She was loving in that way that only a mom can.
Absolutely. That I should go and get tested. And so I did. And I didn't get the results then until the following week that I was positive. And then I think 2 other things happened. The second week, it was really hard to just kind of mentally process. And I know next session that we're going to talk about the mental process through all of this. And then at the very end of it, the third week, my energy tanked, and it was hard. But then I realized I was doing nothing to support my adrenal system. And as soon as I kicked in my adrenal support, I love licorice. I know Kelly laughs at me. I love black licorice.
I love it less.
It's not a bad fit for somebody who doesn't have blood pressure issues. It's great for the adrenal support system. And within a day or 2 of doing that, my energy levels were back to where they had been. Yeah. So that's kind of how we both went through it. And then after I'd had it, you went and got your IgG testing done, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And one thing that I didn't bring up was we also had the low-grade fever, but we didn't realize we had a low-grade fever, and the only reason we caught it was because we were doing daily temperature checks because of my mom, because she's high risk. So we're always really cautious with her anyway. But had we not done that, I wouldn't have even known that I had a low-grade temperature.
It's been a wild experience to go through, and while we know that everyone experiences this differently, we believe that we took the right steps to minimize our illness and maximize our recovery. In this month's class, we want to share those steps with you. This lesson does come with an enormous disclaimer. It's not in any way intended to treat COVID. We're just sharing our experiences with you so that you can see how we supported our immune systems and handled the diagnosis. So your immune system is a bit like a mighty fortress. And you need to grasp how to support your immune system, because it's going to help you to make educated choices about how to take care of it. It's your body's first line of defense against invading bugs and germs. It's a fortress designed to preserve your life and your health. This is Warwick Castle. Now, it's a spot that my family and I have gone to on many occasions. It's so well preserved and restored. It's a delight to go and visit. Now, the castle has seen its fair share of invaders, which I'm sure you could well imagine, but it's remained standing to this day. It's built on a cliff which drops off into the River Avon, and that's what you can see here in this picture. It has a dry moat around the edge. It had battlements for firing arrows from, and something called murder holes for dumping hot pitch out of, or hot oil, or things that were on fire for the people that were coming in underneath. And the walls were virtually impenetrable, and it was stuffed to the gills with hordes of defenders like knights and soldiers. Your body is like this mighty fortress with its own crew of protectors. Your protectors are made up of your immune system. They're a vast network of cells and tissues and organs, and those all work together to defend you from infection. You have millions and millions of defensive white blood cells known as leukocytes. They originate in your bone marrow. And there are two main types of leukocytes. One is called a phagocyte and one is called a macrophage. Phagocytes are like your castle gatekeepers, and macrophages are like the castle knights. The gatekeeper phagocytes continually scout around in your bloodstream and lymphatic system, hunting for any signs of suspicious activity, like sickness, toxins, and foreign invaders. The gatekeeper phagocytes are specifically looking for something called an antigen, and that reveals the presence of a foreign invader. Now, an antigen is a little bit like a foreign enemy waving their flag or their standard in the air, and it identifies their arrival. So as soon as the enemy's flag is spotted, the gatekeeper phagocytes sound the alarm bells, and your immune system kicks in very, very quickly. In a castle, there are many different military men, and they're responsible for defending the garrison. They know that the marauding invaders come in all different shapes and sizes, and they have all sorts of offensive weapons. So their defense includes soldiers with a variety of skills and munitions. And in the same way, your immune system is incredibly adaptable for fighting off a variety of attackers. So upon hearing the alarm bells, your immune system dispatches the knights. Now, the knights of your immune system are called macrophages. Their role is actually to kill the foreign invader by consuming them. Not many other knights that I know of actually ate their victims, but macrophages do. So once the knight macrophage is disposed of the enemy, the gatekeeper phagocyte learns what it looks like so that it can then let the next team of lymphocytes know. Now, these lymphocytes have several teams as well. They have a clear description in mind, and they're like the foot soldiers. They're T cells that go looking for the bad guys and kill them off. And back at the camp, the smithy is working with his team to create the ultimate weapon to destroy the enemy. The blacksmith B cells and their assistant, the T helper cells, start concocting special proteins in your body called antibodies based on what they have learned about the invaders. Now, these antibodies are unique to each type of invader, and they fit into them like a lock and key, and then they effortlessly destroy them. The blacksmith B cell is capable of producing millions and millions of these weapons to quickly neutralize the threat. While all of this is happening in your body, you can experience a high temperature, which makes it difficult for those foreign invaders to reproduce. The purpose of your defense system is not to stop you from getting sick. After all, in a medieval castle, invasion was inevitable. They were expecting it to happen. It's to stop the invaders from increasing to the point that your life is threatened and your castle gets overrun. Due to the vigilance of your immune system, over time your body develops long-term immunity because the blacksmith B cells and the apprentice T cells know what the bad guys look like when they show up the next time, so they can rapidly deploy those right weapons if they show up again and just stop them in their tracks. As with many illnesses, there are risk factors that make COVID harder to fight off. COVID can, but doesn't always, attack the lungs or target the lungs. And that means that pre-existing lung conditions like COPD, lung cancer, moderate to severe asthma, and cystic or pulmonary fibrosis could make your experience with COVID a lot more challenging. Obesity has a history of making infections a lot worse. The reasons why are still somewhat speculative, but most experts seem to think that it's because the high body mass index already means that your lungs and heart are having to work a whole lot harder just to keep you breathing. Individuals with obesity also make lower levels of the hormone adiponectin, which protects your lungs. Dr. Stephen O'Reilly, he's the director of the MRC Metabolic Diseases Unit at Cambridge University, thinks that the risk comes because fat makes and regulates hormones, and the blood clotting protein complement is hormone dependent, and that might explain why some of the people have a harder time with severe blood clotting issues after contracting COVID. Obesity often carries at least one comorbidity and an accompanying health condition, something like diabetes, and that increases concerns when you're facing infection. Diabetes patients are more susceptible to infections because high blood sugar levels weakens the immune system. Dr. Carl Lavie works at John Ochsner Heart and Vascular Institute in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he believes that insulin resistance increases the ACE2 receptors in your body that bind to the coronavirus. So the combination of a welcoming environment for the virus and then an inability to fight it off effectively may explain why so many people are having a hard time getting over it. Heart disease is another risk factor. Harvard Health reports that that's due to a combination of the severe illness and its increased demands on the heart. You know, if you get a fever, that increases your heart rate, makes it more rapid, it's harder work for your heart. Compound that with low oxygen levels from pneumonia, and then it's increased propensity for blood clot formation, and we have issues going on with the heart then. We also know that anybody who's got a severe disease, they have a weakened immune system, they're going to have a difficult time with COVID, and that often places older adults in a position of greater risk because they might have multiple health problems, and they sometimes live close together to one another in these retirement and assisted living settings. But we still know from CDC data and information that only 5.13% of those older adults that get sick are hospitalized, and many of them recover and come home from the hospital. There's a great, incredible group of centenarians who are over 100 years old who've recovered. 2 of those were 107. So just because you get it doesn't mean you're going to succumb to it. Looking at the risk factors, we know that many of them are considered to simply be lifestyle diseases. Heart disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes all fall into that category. So perhaps the question should actually be, what can you do to reduce your risk of lifestyle-related diseases, and how can you improve your health and your immune system and give yourself a fighting chance in case you end up encountering COVID? If your immune system is a modern-day fortress equipped with knights and foot soldiers and blacksmiths, then your lifestyle choices are the bricks and mortar that make up the walls of your fortress, and nutrition is the foundation that your walls are laid upon. What you eat will either promote inflammation and disease or reduce inflammation and promote healing. And how often you make those great choices will determine how robust your foundation is. Just as a house with a strong foundation can withstand a storm, so your body, fortified with nutrients, can prevail against sickness. Kelly and I have made fantastic food choices for years, and our foundation is rock solid. The vitamins A, C, E, and D, and the mineral zinc are all critical for healthy immune function. Studies have shown that individuals low in vitamin D are having a notably hard time with COVID. In his research article on vitamin D deficiency and comorbidities in COVID-19, Hans Bazalski connects low vitamin D levels with hypertension, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and cardiovascular disease. And we know that approximately 42% of Americans are vitamin D deficient. And in a lockdown situation where we get access to less sunlight, you end up having an even lower vitamin D level. And those are only the people that we know have not yet tipped from low normal into out of range. So getting your vitamin D levels checked and supplementing with that nutrient is one really, really easy way, an easy step you can take to protect your health. Food sources include salmon, sardines, tuna, eggs, and shiitake mushrooms, but you really do get most of that from the sunshine. Vitamin A helps your body to make and use antibodies. The special proteins formed by your B cells and T helper cells, your blacksmith and your assistant. Vitamin A also plays a role in putting on the brakes and preventing your immune system and inflammatory system from overreacting. So food sources include sweet potato, carrots, spinach, kale, mustard, collard, turnip, and beet greens, and Swiss chard and winter squash. Vitamin C is necessary for the production of phagocytes. Those are your castle gatekeepers. Now, sometimes in a battle, the warrior gets wounded, and that can be true for phagocytes as well. They attack the invaders using toxins such as superoxide radicals and hypochlorous acid, or a type of bleach, and that's what that is, hypochlorous, right? So sometimes this inflicts damage on the phagocytic gatekeeper as he's trying to do damage to the invading cell. Now, like a suit of armor, vitamin C is there to help protect them. And finally, we know that our gatekeepers produce something called interferons, which help us to kill off those viruses like COVID when we get them. And vitamin C increases our interferon production. Our food sources of vitamin C include papaya, bell peppers, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, strawberries, pineapple, oranges, kiwi fruit, cantaloupe, and cauliflower. It's everywhere. It's water soluble and it's destroyed by heat in cooking, so get your raw fruits and veggies in. Now, zinc specifically supports the knights, or our macrophages, in our fortress. So when a knight that's full of zinc consumes an invader, it essentially poisons the invader to death with all that zinc and kills it. And we know from a 2010 laboratory study that zinc inhibited the action and activity and replication of another type of coronavirus. And we know that it can reduce the duration of the common cold. We also know that diets low in zinc can induce measurable reductions in the activity of the immune system. Older adults are especially prone to lowered immunity because of low zinc levels. And the fabulous news is that correcting that deficiency can reverse those concerns within weeks. Again, a very easy thing for you to do to kind of shore up your immune system in case COVID comes calling. Food sources of zinc include beef, lamb, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, lentils, garbanzo beans, cashews, turkey, quinoa, and shrimp. And I'll talk a little bit more about the dosing when Kelly and I tell you about what supplements it was that we took. Vitamin E is the next one that I want to talk about. One of the risk factors that I previously mentioned was that of aging. And many individuals don't actually eat enough nutrients or the right nutrients to keep their vitamin E levels where they should be. As you age, your body uses more vitamin E to protect you from age-related infection and free radical damage that causes aging. So it's very, very busy inside your body. Now, vitamin E directly supports your T cell foot soldiers, helping them to move from basic training to full-fledged service. As we age, those low vitamin E levels make it harder to fight off infection because the T cell foot soldiers never mature or multiply. They're called naive T cells because they literally have no idea what to do when they encounter antigens or foreign invaders. Just 200 milligrams of vitamin E a day can significantly reduce your risk of contracting an upper respiratory infection, especially the common cold, even if you're over 65. We also know that vitamin E is extremely protective of your heart and significantly reduces your risk of a cardiovascular event, which is another risk factor for COVID. So all in all, vitamin E is an important building block in your immune fortress. Food sources for vitamin E include sunflower seeds, almonds, spinach, Swiss chard, avocado, peanuts, asparagus, and turnip, beet, and mustard greens. It doesn't do you much good to mount a defense against a foreign invader and then invite in an enemy that will destroy your fortress from the inside out. That's exactly what happens when you consume sugar and alcohol. They come disguised as Trojan horses. They're sweetly packaged, they often seem like a gift or a treat, they look pretty innocuous from the outside, but they're going to do an immense amount of damage to your ability to fight off an infection. There was a meta-analysis done and published in 2018 that concluded that a high consumption of alcohol is associated with an 83% increased risk of getting community-acquired pneumonia. Each 1 to 2 units of alcohol intake per day increased the risk of getting that infection by 8%. Based on a study from 1970, we know that eating sugar can cause your castle knights to take a nap for several hours after you've eaten it. That renders them pretty useless. They're sleeping on the job, and when the invaders come, they're not awake and alert and ready to deal with them. But we also know that eating high amounts of sugar can result in obesity, in insulin resistance, in heart disease, and type 2 diabetes, which are all tremendous risk factors for COVID-19. When you are deciding what to make for your dinner today, choose some of the foods that we've talked about. They're foods that are going to support your immune system and help keep you and your defenses completely resilient. Avoid things that undermine your ability to stay healthy, both today and in the future. The next thing we want to talk to you about is the supplements that we take. When infection comes calling, Kelly and I have both got our own arsenal of supplements that we love to turn to. So the first thing we both are on all the time is a multivitamin.
Yes.
Yeah, and I like to take Pure Encapsulations 1, because it's 1 capsule every single day. Mm-hmm. But I know you love to take polyphenol nutrients with NAC.
Yeah, I actually used to take the 1, but just because I have so many underlying issues, I wanted something a little bit of a heavier hitter. Mm-hmm. So I switched over to the Nutrient 950 with NAC, also by Pure Encapsulations.
Right. Yeah. We've both spent hours and hours doing homework for our teacher, Dr. Hanalei, yes, and breaking down all of these recipes by the nutrient value. And it's really easy to see that these days you cannot get the nutrients out of the food that you may be used to. Even 40 years ago or 60 years ago, the nutrient density is just not there anymore. So then the next thing we do is probiotics on a regular basis, because I have we do them slightly differently.
Yes.
Yeah, so probiotics we know come from a varied diet. They come from fermented foods, and then they come in our supplemental form. Yeah. But I know that you love fermented foods.
And I didn't always.
Right.
I realized how good they were for me, and I realized that in America we don't really use that part of our palate.
No, we don't.
And the rest of the world does. Yeah. I consistently exposed myself to small doses of different types of fermented food, and the most amazing thing happened. My palate started to shift. Mm-hmm. So now not only do I eat the fermented food, but I'll take the juice from the container and I'm like, oh goodness.
And because I can't do that very well and I don't tolerate it super well, I take Claire brand Lacto Prime Plus. It's a specific carbohydrate one that doesn't have some of those carbohydrates in it that can really upset my gut. But I do recommend a broad spectrum for my clients is Therabiotic by Claire Labs. I really like the product that they have to offer. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing that I wanted to talk about was vitamin D, because we talked about how important that was. Yeah. My multi already has 2,000 IUs in, so I bumped up and I took another 5,000 IUs. But I know you love your vitamin D.
I do.
If feel like something's coming on, so tell them a little bit about what you did and why you did what you did.
I always take vitamin D. There's vitamin D in the multi that I take too. I did 25,000 IU 3 times a day. And if I bump up my D and I take it acutely for like the 3 times a day for 3 days, within 20 minutes to 40 minutes after taking that first dose, I feel a lessening of symptoms.
It would be important to note in this, you feel really in tune with your body. This comes out of years of research and school. We looked at multiple reports in school that showed that hypervitaminosis, which is like toxicity from taking too many vitamins, is really, really rare.
Yeah.
And usually when that happens, simply backing off of that vitamin for a short season, because they've usually got a fairly short half-life, you can kind of get back to normal levels. It's really a very safe way to kind of take care of your health.
Whatever vitamins you're taking, whatever dosing, I think you have to learn how to listen to your body.
Yes.
So if you have never taken vitamin supplementation like that, I don't know that I would say just do 25,000 3 times a day for 3 days.
No.
I would say, why don't you slowly bump up your dose and see how you tolerate it, knowing that an acute dose is going to be your end goal.
Right. Now you did this with vitamin A as well.
I did.
Right. So tell me about that.
So I did vitamin A, 25,000 IU 3 times a day for 3 days.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about zinc for a minute. My multi has 25 milligrams in it just across the board. But I understand this is one where you just didn't bump up quite so much. You just did like 15 milligrams.
Right, yeah. And because I know what vitamin A and vitamin D do for my immune system, zinc is more like the supporting character in my mind, right? Like I know certain processes are zinc dependent. So I definitely want to make sure that I have enough of it in there for my body to utilize all the D and all the A that I'm dumping in.
Right. That sounds good. Yeah. Now, I just want to mention zinc picolinate, zinc acetate, and zinc citrate as some of the most absorbable types. So if you're looking for a zinc supplement, those are ones that are really helpful. Yeah. And then most people need 25 to 30 milligrams per day. We usually get about 10 milligrams out of our food. So supplementing with 10 to 15 is on an everyday basis is pretty normal. And then in acute situations, like when you get sick, men might need up to 60 milligrams and women might need up to 45, just depend on what's going on, because zinc has an interplay with copper, and so you don't want to drive up your zinc so high that you're downing your copper and causing an imbalance. And this is how these things work. This is why we have to pay attention to how we're feeling and what we're doing.
Yep.
Now, we both took N-acetylcysteine, that NAC. So let's talk a minute about that. We know that it's one of the precursors of glutathione.
Yep.
We also know that it's a fantastic agent for replenishing the levels of glutathione, specifically in the lungs, and that it's used in helping COPD patients, that it alleviates bronchial spasms and constriction and opens up the airways.
Right.
I know I rely on it a lot just dealing with allergies on a daily basis.
Right.
And you can take up to 600 milligrams twice a day, which is what I think you did, correct?
I did. And I didn't want it to go into my lungs. So instead of just sticking with the 600 once a day, I did a second dose in the evening with dinner.
And I just did 600 milligrams once a day. And that was actually a bump up because on a daily basis, I typically only do 200. And so I bumped up from 200 to 600. And while neither one of us can say that taking NAC, was the cure and fixed our lung issues or whatever, neither one of us felt like COVID hit our lungs at all. We felt like our lungs were clear, clean,
completely
healthy, and unaffected.
Did not feel like a respiratory virus at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we did something a little bit different. This is where we went separate ways. You took Astragalus, which we know is phenomenal for supporting respiratory health. So how much of that did you take?
I did the Gaia Herbs Astragalus Supreme, and I took 2 capsules at bedtime. Again, because dosing at bedtime is phenomenal for the immune system.
Yes, absolutely. And I went a different route. My go-to in my cabinet is Echinacea and Goldenseal. And so I did those two. Gaia Herbs, I did their Echinacea, and then Vital Nutrients does a Goldenseal Plus. And so both of those are trusted for their antiviral capabilities. And then the Goldenseal is really good for the sort of producing mucus, which helps flush out, which we like, and improving our immune cell response.
Right.
But Goldenseal is a short-term use one. It's not one that you should use for an extended time. So the week was great, but I wouldn't do it for a super long time.
And same with the Astragalus.
Yeah.
I think in some indications, depending on what you have going on just with underlying immune issues, it may be beneficial.
Yeah.
I only lean into Astragalus Supreme when I'm wanting to support my immune system when it's actively managing something.
Right, because otherwise you're in danger, I think, of pushing that immune system into overactivity.
Correct.
All of the time, and
it doesn't need to be.
It doesn't need to be.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be on
high alert always.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I had already been taking Olive Irex for some fungal stuff that was going on, and so I just continued to do that because olive leaf is known for its cardiac support, its antiviral properties, its help with insulin resistance, which we know are all COVID issues, and they're not necessarily issues that I deal with, but just in the interest of shoring up and covering every base,
right.
I continued to take that olive leaf extract as well, which was really great. Just took one of those twice a day. The other one that I took that I wanted to make sure we shared with everybody was CDP Choline, which is relatively, it's not one that people I think even know about or
I've never played with that one.
No. Dr. Shaw is with Great Plains Laboratories, and he did an excellent presentation right when COVID was coming out about how CDP Choline can help reduce something called PLA2, and that PLA is something that happens when your immune system gets activated, and some of it is okay, but an overreaction of it or excessive amounts of it can really cause a great deal of damage to the cells.
Right.
And that happens with a lot of these viruses. It can happen with West Nile virus and parvo as well as coronavirus. And so he just talked about how taking the CDP Choline had knocked that down, and he had seen great results in people with keeping that virus under control. And I had not felt very well for that first week, but then after I took that CDP Choline, the next day I felt like I had turned the corner and just gotten a lot of things under control. And then the last piece that I wanted to talk about is you got your energy back pretty quick.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Probably within like 2 days of dealing with all this, and I think the reason there was a 2-day delay is because I'm a mom, so I was still dealing with my kids because we're all a couple days lagging. So once I got them to the point where they were normal again, and kids just bounce back so fast anyway, I really was back to, okay, now you guys are stable, I'm gonna go run. And I was back to running my normal 2.5 miles, and then not being wiped out. Everything just felt normal. Like I said before, I would have never guessed that it was COVID if I hadn't had my friends diagnosed, and then you got diagnosed, and we had some similar symptoms, and I thought, I guess I'll maybe go do that antibody test.
Right.
And I had it.
Right. There are a couple of things that I want to remind you of as we wrap up this session. Supplements can have a powerful effect on your body, and they can interact with your medications. It's important to check with your healthcare professional to make sure that you aren't taking anything that might interact with any medications that you're on. And it's also important to remember that we are not advising that you use these things as treatments for COVID. We are simply letting you know what we did and what we found helpful while we were battling the virus. Today we've discussed how your immune system works. We've looked at some health conditions that increase your risk if you contract COVID, and we've looked at the food and supplements that can help support your immune system. Next month, we're going to take a look at the softer skills of immune support that are as critical if you want a fighting chance at survival. We always face the risk of infection. It might be COVID today, it's going to be something else tomorrow. It's flu season just around the corner. We are always facing this risk. Just remember, it's not always about avoiding the contagion. It's about stopping the invaders from increasing to the point that your life is threatened and your castle's overrun. So much of that is dependent on your lifestyle and how your health is as you face those infections. So make changes and shore up your defenses while you still have the opportunity. Thanks for joining us today. We'll look forward to seeing you in our next lesson.